I guess some people would call it a blessing. Being married to your college sweetheart, building a business together from scratch, raising two kids who smile like their mother. For a long time, I believed that too. I believed in us. I believed in her. But now, when I look back, I wonder if there were signs I ignored, little cracks in the surface that I brushed off as stress or ambition, or maybe just life being life. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed so quietly, so elegantly, that for years you didn't even realize your entire world was being hollowed out from the inside? I have. And the worst part? It wasn't just her. It was them. The very people I trusted the most. People I considered family. People I built everything with. You see, I wasn't born into wealth. Far from it. My father worked double shifts fixing elevators downtown. My mum cleaned offices at night. I started coding on an old busted laptop in high school. By the time I met Elise in college, I had already mapped out a crude prototype of what would become our future business. It was messy, but it worked. She believed in it, believed in me, or so I thought. We were inseparable, slept on floors, ate ramen, took turns calling investors, pitching them dreams. Eventually, someone bit. That small seed. Money was all we needed. Within 5 years, we built a software solution that major logistics companies were fighting over. The business exploded. We had our first million in the bank before either of us turned 30. Married, bought a house, had our first child, then the second. And all that time, I kept my head down, focused on the work, on making sure we were secure, that they were secure. Elise took on a more public role, marketing, PR, fundraising. She had a natural charisma, a presence that made her the face of the company. I didn't mind. I hated the spotlight. I preferred the back end, the code, the strategy. But success brings shadows. I began to notice little things. Conversations that stopped when I entered a room. Board members whispering with Elise more than with me. Key decisions being made without my input. Brushed off as timing, or you were busy with development. And then came the restructuring. I was presented with a new organizational chart at a quarterly meeting. A more efficient leadership model, they said. Elise would become CEO. I'd remain Chief Technical Officer, but they suggested I focus more on innovation and less on corporate operations. I nodded. I told myself it was fine, that she deserved it, that it wasn't about titles, it was about impact. But inside, something twisted. They moved my office, smaller, tucked in the corner. My access to some internal financials and planning tools was restricted for security. My voice in meetings became more of a suggestion than a decision. Still, I said nothing, because that's who I was. I endured. I trusted. I believed love could not be so calculated, that the woman I shared my life with could never. One evening, after the kids were asleep, Elise came into my home office. She had a glass of wine in one hand, and something in her eyes I couldn't quite read. Maybe guilt, maybe something colder. "You've seemed distant lately," she said, softly, sitting on the edge of the desk. "I'm just tired," I replied. "A lot going on." She reached out, touched my hand. "You know I couldn't have built this without you." I wanted to believe her, so badly, but in my gut, there was a hollowness that wouldn't leave. I remember asking her then, just half joking, "Promise me you'll never cut me out." She laughed. "Cut you out? You are this company." And maybe that was the moment I should have known. When someone tells you something too perfectly, too sweetly, it's usually because they're trying to soften the blow they haven't delivered yet. I didn't realize then, but the trap was already set. It came 3 months later. A late Friday afternoon. I was pulled into a surprise board meeting. No agenda, no notice. The room felt off, cold. Elise sat at the head of the table. Her allies, our allies once, lined up on either side. Their expressions were tight, rehearsed. Someone read a formal resolution, something about performance misalignment, loss of investor confidence, and fiduciary responsibility. I was being ousted, fired, from the company I built, from the dream we created. Just like that. Elise didn't say a word as they handed me the exit paperwork. Just watched. Her hands folded neatly in her lap, like she had already mourned me. Moved. On, I didn't rage. I didn't argue. I signed the papers. I walked out. And that night, I sat in my car outside the house we bought together, watched the lights in the upstairs bedroom. I thought about the kids, about how none of this was in the story I imagined. When I first kissed her on that cracked dorm bench 12 years ago. But I wasn't done. Not yet. You see? What they didn't know was that while they were plotting my end, I had quietly been building something of my own. Not out of suspicion, at least not at first, but out of instinct. A backup, a failsafe. And as I sat there in the silence of that car, something in me finally broke free. Not anger, not vengeance. Clarity. They thought they buried me, but they didn't know. I was the one who planted the seeds. I didn't go back home that night. I couldn't. I drove around until the city blurred into silence, and finally checked into a small hotel near the outskirts. Not one of those fancy chain spots, just a quiet place. Room 206, broken lamp, view of a parking lot. Somehow, that felt more honest than anything I'd seen in weeks. I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. I think that's when it hit me. Not just the betrayal, but the loneliness that came with it. The kind that sneaks up on you when the person you used to trust with everything suddenly becomes a stranger. Or worse, an opponent. You'd think I'd be angry. And yes, there was anger. But it was the kind that didn't shout. It sat in my chest like a weight, like cold steel. Heavy, but steady. And it was that steadiness that kept me from doing anything reckless. Instead, I made calls. I spoke to the lawyer I'd hired a year ago, someone I'd met through a mutual friend. I never told Elise about him. Not because I didn't trust her, back then, but because I'd started to sense, even early on, that I should prepare for the day things stopped making sense. He listened carefully. He wasn't surprised. We spent the whole day going through old contracts, bylaws, ownership clauses. Turns out my shares were still technically mine. They couldn't take those away. They could fire me, ice me out, but they couldn't erase me. Not completely. And more importantly, there were records. Digital fingerprints they didn't think to cover. Patterns of internal transfers. Executive bonuses pushed through under the radar. New consulting firms. Getting payouts for unclear services. Firms I later found were registered under Elise's college friends, cousins, even a childhood neighbor. The same people who had now taken seats on the board. It was a web, and she had spun it right under my nose, but I didn't act yet. Instead, I disappeared. I stayed quiet for weeks. No texts, no emails. I let them think I was licking my wounds, broken, beaten, out of the game. And Elise, she began to reach out. It started simple. A message. The kids miss you. Can we talk? Then a voicemail. Her voice lower, slower. I didn't want it to be like this. You have no idea how complicated it got. And finally, she showed up at the hotel. I don't know how she found me. Maybe she always knew me better than I thought. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe it was something else entirely. She knocked once. I opened the door. She looked tired. Not in a messy way, but in that curated, subtle way people look when they want you to feel sorry for them. Designer coat, no makeup, just the right amount of vulnerability. I didn't say anything. I stepped aside. She walked in. She looked around the tiny room, sat on the edge of the bed, let out a sigh. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "You know that, right?" I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. She looked up. "It got too big. The company, the pressure. Investors wanted certainty. They said we needed someone more visible, someone who could sell the vision." "You mean someone who could smile while stabbing me in the back?" I said, quiet. She flinched. "Just a little." "No," she said. "It wasn't like that. At least, not at first, but things happened. The board pushed. And maybe I let it happen." Silence. Then, her voice dropped again. "I miss you," she said. "The kids do too. We could fix this. I could talk to them. Maybe get you back in. Or at least work something out." And for a second, I saw the woman I married. Or maybe just the mask I used to believe in, but I didn't respond. Not because I hadn't imagined this moment, her realizing what she'd done, trying to make it right, but because I knew now it wasn't regret she was offering. It was damage control. She wasn't here for me. She was here because something had changed. She could feel it. She knew I wasn't just grieving. I was planning. And that scared her. I finally spoke. "You made your choices, Elise. You aligned yourself with people who see everything as a transaction. That includes love, loyalty, me." She looked down. "I was scared," she said, "of losing everything." "You mean the company?" I asked. She hesitated. "No, I mean the life we built." A pause. "I still love you," she added softly. That word hung in the air like smoke. Maybe she meant it. Maybe a part of her did still love the version of me that stayed silent, that trusted her blindly. The version she could shape and use. The one who wouldn't fight back. But that version of me was gone. Still, I didn't throw her out. I didn't scream. I just nodded slowly. "Thanks for stopping by," I said, opening the door. She stood, walked past me, paused in the doorway. "I really didn't want it to end like this," she whispered. I didn't answer, and then she left. The thing is, betrayal doesn't happen in one sharp moment. It happens in layers, in soft lies, in silence, in carefully worded meetings and unsigned emails. By the time the knife is in your back, it's already been sharpened for months, by people smiling to your face. But if Elise thought that quiet visit would slow me down, she was wrong. I'd spent too long pretending to be the man everyone could use without fear, the one who'd never push back, never question, never fight. But what none of them knew, what Elise forgot, is that the one who builds the machine knows exactly how to break it, and I wasn't done, not even close. There's a strange freedom in being underestimated. Once people think you've lost, they stop watching, and that's when you move. I didn't go back to the office, didn't show my face at public events. I didn't even visit my kids right away, not because I didn't miss them, but because I needed to make sure that when I returned, I did so on my terms. And in the shadows of that silence, I worked. You'd be surprised what people leave lying around when they think you've disappeared. Emails, audit trails, meeting recordings, all accessible through backup protocols they forgot I'd built myself. After all, the system was my brainchild. The infrastructure, the encryption, all mine. I never told them I'd retained admin access. Why would I? While Elise and her allies were celebrating board votes and press releases, I was quietly combing through years of digital footprints. Elise's friend Cara, head of people operations, had set up offshore accounts tied to suspicious retention bonuses. Her cousin Darren, the new CFO, had rewritten fiscal reports with what looked like clean formatting, but masked unusually high vendor payouts to vendors that didn't exist before Elise became CEO. It was like watching termites eat through beams. From the outside, the house looked fine. Inside, it was hollow. And yet, I didn't go public. Not yet. Because I knew Elise. She was careful. She always left just enough plausible deniability. Never signed anything directly. Always filtered her instructions through others. If I exposed her too early, she'd spin it. Make herself the victim. Say it was all Cara and Darren. That she was misled. No. If I was going to bring her down, it had to be clean, complete, and irreversible. So I waited, collected, built timelines, cross-referenced statements with transaction data, recorded phone calls where Cara bragged to close friends, unaware I'd mirrored her corporate phone. I even traced internal Slack messages where board members mocked my departure, called me the soft one, the real genius, but no spine. They were right about one thing. I was the real genius, but the spine, that was growing back, bone by bone. During those weeks, I also started rebuilding myself, not just legally, but personally. I met with former engineers and developers who had left our company months before my ousting. Many of them pushed out or underpaid once Elise took over. I listened. I apologized for not noticing how toxic it had gotten. And one by one, they rejoined me. Quietly. We didn't open a new company. That would be too loud. Instead, we built something smaller, leaner, better, and most importantly, something that could directly compete with what Elise now controlled. In the background, my network expanded. Former clients, partners, even two ex-board members who had quit in protest when the company restructured. They remembered me, not as the loudest voice in the room, but as the one who delivered, the one who built, and they trusted me. It didn't take long before we had seed funding, just enough. I called it Arc Phase, a nod to starting over. Quietly, we began beta testing a new logistics software. Faster, cleaner UI, smarter back-end integrations. Everything. The old company had neglected while Elise chased headlines and fancy user conferences. The industry noticed. Whispers started. A few articles. A couple of podcasts wondering if the original brain behind Sector Blue, that was our old company, was back in the game. I knew Elise had seen them. I knew because one night she called again. This time, I didn't let it go to voicemail. Her voice was tight, brittle. So, it's true, she said. You're launching something. I didn't answer right away. I thought you wanted peace, she added, her tone dipping into something performative. Not another war. Peace was what I wanted before you took everything, I said, calmly. She sighed. You're going to destroy what we built. No, I said, quieter this time. You already did that. Another pause. Then she tried something else. The kids have been asking about you. That cut deeper than I let on. I know, I whispered, and I'll see them soon. She softened her voice, like she always did when she was about to ask for something. Can we meet? Just talk. Not about the company. Just us. But there was no just us anymore. I agreed to meet, but not because I wanted closure. I wanted to see her eyes when I told her what was coming. We met at a rooftop bar downtown, the same one where we used to celebrate product launches years ago. She wore the dress I bought her on our 5th anniversary. Maybe it was a message, or maybe just manipulation. I've missed you, she said. I know, I replied. We ordered drinks. She tried to steer the conversation toward the kids. I played along. I even smiled a little, but she knew. She could feel it in the way I watched her. Calm, patient, unreadable. Then I finally said it. I know what you've done, Elise. She froze. The smile dropped, just for a second. I don't know what you offshore payments, falsified vendor invoices, insider stock deals. I've got everything. Her lips parted slightly. That's ridiculous. I reached into my coat pocket and slid a small USB drive onto the table. I won't use it. Not yet. But I could. And if I do, you won't just lose the company. You'll lose everything. She didn't touch the drive, didn't even look at it. Instead, she asked the question I'd been waiting for. "What do you want?" And I looked her in the eyes, really looked. And for the first time in a long time, I felt absolutely clear. "You'll find out soon enough." I stood, left the drink untouched. She didn't call after me because she finally understood. I wasn't here to rebuild our life. I was here to burn down hers, brick by brick. It didn't take long. 1 week after our rooftop meeting, the first real tremor hit them, not from me directly, but from the market. Sector Blue's largest contract, a multi-million-dollar deal with a national freight company, was suddenly under review, and I didn't have to lift a finger, because the freight company's VP of operations. He used to be my intern. I trained him, back when Elise barely knew the difference between a back-end gateway and a billing API. And unlike Elise, I never forgot where I came from. I never treated people as disposable. That man had called me after hearing rumors about ArcPhase. I told him nothing concrete. I didn't need to. Just a few careful words. All I can say is, you might want to take a closer look at what you're paying for. 2 days later, their legal team requested a full audit of Sector Blue's deployment. That's when Elise reached out again. This time, no soft tones, no guilt, just panic. "You're poisoning everything," she hissed on the phone. "This isn't about business anymore, is it? This is personal." "It was always personal," I said. "You just didn't realize how personal until now." There was a silence. Then she tried to regain control. "We can still fix this," she said. "You want a seat back on the board? Fine. We can bring you in as an advisor, publicly. It'll restore investor confidence. We both win." And there it was. Her first real offer to share power again. But it wasn't about fairness. It was desperation. She needed my name, my reputation, the one thing she couldn't replicate. I declined, and then I made my next move. It started with a press interview. Just a small publication, an industry blog, followed mostly by logistics nerds and startup insiders. But the interviewer was smart. She didn't ask about Elise. She asked about philosophy, about why I'd stepped away, about what I thought the industry had lost in the chase for growth at any cost. And I answered, carefully, calmly. I think somewhere along the way, we started valuing visibility over vision. There's a difference between running a company and running a narrative. That quote spread faster than I expected. Investors noticed. A few board members, the ones who had been on the fence, started asking Elise quiet questions. Why hadn't they patented some of the core modules I'd built? Why were R&D budgets shrinking while executive bonuses kept climbing? Why was ArcPhase outperforming in tests with a fraction of the funding? Meanwhile, I kept building. ArcPhase entered limited trials with 2 regional distributors. Word spread. Our waitlist doubled in 3 weeks. And every time a new sign-up came in from a former Sector Blue client, I forwarded the confirmation to a private email I knew Kara still monitored. I wanted them to feel it. The unraveling. But I still wasn't done. The next step was deeper, subtle. I hired an independent auditing firm, not to audit them, but to offer audits broadly to a few logistics firms with questionable software partnerships. It wasn't about Sector Blue officially, just best practices, transparency, industry hygiene. But when those companies looked under the hood of their current systems and found inconsistencies, guess who built most of those systems? Sector Blue. Guess who had quietly logged years of backdoor flaws, unstable modules, and hidden licensing violations? Me. I didn't send any accusations. I didn't need to. I just gave people permission to look. And what they found started making Elise's name uncomfortable to say in meetings. I heard rumors that investors were demanding an internal review, that Kara had taken an extended leave, and Darren was re-evaluating his role. Elise, to her credit, didn't run. She stood firm, denied everything, blamed technical oversights and legacy issues. She even staged a company-wide town hall where she tried to rally the troops. Bold lipstick, bright blazer, words like resilience, vision, adaptability. But behind her, the cracks were showing. And still, I said nothing publicly, because Elise needed to unravel in silence. That was the true punishment. Not a scandal, not a takedown, just the slow erosion of control, the trust slipping through her fingers. She tried reaching out again, this time through her lawyer, a settlement offer. Not money, something worse, a request to sign an NDA and quietly transfer some of my remaining intellectual property rights in exchange for future cooperation. They were terrified of what I still knew. I didn't respond. Instead, I sent them something else, an invitation. 2. A private industry dinner. Not open to the public, just a curated guest list, top logistics executives, a few key investors, a handful of quiet media voices, and me and Elise. I reserved the rooftop at the Langford Hotel, the same venue where we'd once celebrated our Series B funding. I didn't say why I wanted her there, but I knew she'd come, because by now, she had no choice. She needed to know what I was going to say, what I was going to show, and if she was smart, she was already terrified, not of what I might do, but of the fact that I hadn't done it yet. The night of the dinner arrived with the kind of quiet anticipation that only comes before a storm you know is coming, but no one else does. Langford's rooftop glowed with soft amber lights, the skyline humming in the background. I arrived early, not to prepare, but to watch, to feel the shift before it became visible. One by one, they showed up, investors in tailored suits, executives with curious eyes, influencers in the logistics world who had heard whispers about ARC phase and wanted to be part of the next big thing, and then Elise. She entered like she always did, poised, confident, her smile sharp enough to slice through any room, but something in her eyes betrayed her, a flicker of unease. Maybe it was the silence I'd kept. Maybe it was the weight of not knowing. She scanned the room, and when our eyes met, I nodded, polite, almost warm. She walked over, glass of white, wine in hand. "You've been busy," she said softly. "I've always been busy. You just didn't notice." A pause. Then, "What is this?" I smiled. A reunion. Before she could respond, I stepped away, greeted a few guests, shook, hands shared laughs, the kind of performance she once mastered. Tonight, the stage was mine. Dinner was served. Conversation flowed. Nothing overt. No dramatic speeches. Just presence. Me, visible again. A reminder that I hadn't vanished. I'd simply been waiting. Then, near the end of the evening, I asked for a few minutes. Everyone quieted. I stood, no microphone, no spotlight, and began with something simple. "I want to thank you all for coming. It's been a long time since I've stood in a room like this, especially one filled with people who've shaped the future of our industry. I've missed this. Not the attention, but the substance. A few smiles, nods. But tonight isn't about announcements or press. It's about remembering where we've come from and asking where we lost our way." I let that sit. I built systems, I continued, that were designed to move goods efficiently, but also to move people, to inspire trust. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that trust isn't just a deliverable. It's the foundation. Elise stiffened in her seat. I turned slightly toward her, not accusatory, just acknowledging her presence. "There are companies," I said, "that grew too fast, that prioritized image over integrity, that rewarded shortcuts while punishing honesty. Some of you in this room invested in those companies. Some of you ran them, and some of you, like me, were betrayed by them." Still calm, still composed. Then I held up a simple file folder. "In the interest of transparency," I said, "I've commissioned a third-party forensic report. one that details questionable financial activities over the last 3 years at a certain firm we all know. Elise's glass froze mid-air. I won't read from it tonight. I won't shame anyone here. But I will say this. If you've trusted your money, your data, or your clients to a leadership team that values loyalty to each other more than loyalty to truth, you may want to reconsider. A few heads turned toward Elise. 1 or 2 investors looked directly at her, not in accusation, but concern, caution. I set the folder on the table, beside a known VC whose firm had doubled down on Sector Blue just months before. He reached for it, and just like that, the first fracture became visible. Afterward, Elise cornered me on the balcony. "You're destroying us," she whispered, the veneer finally cracking. "You think this makes you noble?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. You could have come back. We could have rebuilt. You already rebuilt, I interrupted. You just didn't think I'd notice you left me out of the blueprints. Her voice dropped. Bitter. "You're not who you used to be." "No," I said quietly. "I'm finally who I should have been all along." She stared at me for a long time, and I swear, beneath the frustration, the ego, there was something like fear, because she knew what was coming next. I wasn't just taking back my name. I was taking everything. That week, 3 major clients suspended their contracts with Sector Blue. One announced a pilot with ArcPhase. Elise held an emergency board meeting. I didn't attend. I didn't have to, because the seed of doubt had been planted, watered, and now it was growing wild. Inside their fortress of confidence, termites had eaten through the foundation. Elise and her allies scrambled to repaint the walls, but everyone could smell the rot. Cara resigned. Darren took time away to deal with family matters. And Elise, she began releasing statements about evolving leadership strategies and reaffirming company values. It was all noise. I stayed quiet, continued building ArcPhase, meeting with partners, spending time, finally, with my children again. And every time I looked at them, I was reminded why I'd waited, why I hadn't screamed when they tried to erase me, why I endured. Because nothing worth protecting is built with rage. It's built with resolve. And I wasn't finished yet. The next blow wouldn't just shake them, it would end them. There's a kind of silence that follows collapse. Not the loud crash of walls crumbling, but the eerie, breathless pause right after. That's what the morning felt like when it all fell apart for Elise. I was having breakfast with my daughter. Just her and I, pancakes and strawberries, her asking if I'd be there for her art show next week, when my phone lit up. 5 missed calls. 2 voicemails. One from a former Sector Blue board member, his voice clipped and breathless. They know. The media got it. I didn't check the headlines right away. I didn't need to. I'd been preparing this drop for weeks, timing it, feeding it, making sure every breadcrumb led to the same undeniable truth. It wasn't just the financial misconduct, though that alone was damning. It was what lay beneath it. The misuse of customer data, the hidden AI licensing agreements Elise had approved through shell firms, the audit reports she had signed off on despite knowing they were doctored. All traced, all documented, all time-stamped, and, this time, the story didn't come from me. It came from them, the former engineers I had once mentored, the clients she had burned, the employees silenced or pushed out. I'd simply connected the dots and then stepped out of the way. When the first exposé dropped, a 5-page investigation by a respected tech publication, I didn't make a statement. I didn't post online. I didn't clap back. Because the truth, when finally released, doesn't need an audience to echo. It rings all on its own. By noon, Sector Blue's stock had dropped 27%. Investors froze all activity. Contracts were cancelled. The SEC announced a formal inquiry, and Elise, she resigned, not in some graceful face-saving move, no press conference, no farewell video, Just a single sentence buried in a company-wide email. Effective immediately, I will step down. As CEO, I didn't smile when I read it. I just exhaled, like something old and heavy had finally left my body. Later that day, Kara's personal assistant leaked screenshots, internal memos, direct messages that Elise had sent, where she joked about cutting me out, called me too soft to fight back, bragged about her control over the board. Those messages spread like wildfire, and just like that, the image she had spent years crafting cracked wide open. But I wasn't finished. There was still one last move, one that no one saw coming. You see, long before the betrayal, back when Sector Blue was still just an idea scribbled on napkins and whiteboards, I had created something, an architecture model, a source code structure I'd written from scratch. Not for logistics, but for security, something we never launched. It had been shelved, forgotten. But it was mine, fully, legally, and still untouched. I reactivated it, and within weeks, ArcPhase unveiled Helix Vault, a data protection platform that immediately outperformed every offering Sector Blue had on the market. The tech community went wild. Suddenly, ArcPhase wasn't just the startup by that guy who got screwed. It was the future. Investors flocked. Clients pivoted. Partners who had once ghosted me were now reaching out, apologizing, offering deals. But I wasn't bitter. I didn't need apologies. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing something lost. I was building something new, stronger, simpler, and built on truth, not performance. And Elise, she didn't reach out again. Not a call, not a message, nothing. But I heard through someone, a friend of a friend, that she was staying at a short-term rental now, downsized, silent, out of the press. That she'd tried consulting, but doors kept closing. People remembered. People always remember. She had been the star of every room once. Now she couldn't even get in. As for her allies, Kara's accounts were frozen. Darren was under federal investigation for fraudulent reporting. One by one, they were unraveling, just like the company they built their schemes on. Not because I destroyed them, because I let them destroy themselves. That's the part no one talks about in stories like this. Revenge isn't loud. It's not fire and chaos and dramatic exits. It's patient. It's precise. It's watching the match you handed them burn down the house they thought you'd never escape. And I walked away without a scar. It's strange, the quiet that follows after everything's been taken back. After the empire they tried to steal collapses in on itself. You expect to feel something bigger, louder, vindication, triumph, maybe even joy. But for me, it wasn't any of that. It was stillness, like standing alone in a place you once shared with someone else and realizing the only thing left echoing is your own breath. Elise disappeared from the public eye entirely after her resignation. No podcast redemption arc, no interviews, no memoir about lessons learned, just silence. The last time I heard her name was in a private conversation. Someone casually mentioning she'd tried to launch a coaching firm for female tech founders. It folded in 2 months. I don't hate her. That surprises people when I say it out loud. But it's true. I pity her. Not because she lost everything, but because she gave up what actually mattered. She traded authenticity for optics, substance for control, love for leverage. And in the end, she lost, not because I fought harder, but because she never realized the foundation she built her life on was never hers to begin with. It was mine, and it always had been. My kids know a different father now, not the man who vanished behind code and trust and silent loyalty, but the one who came back, the one who picks them up from school twice a week, the one who colors with them on the floor, the one who listens when they ramble about class projects and imaginary friends. They ask about their mum sometimes. I tell them the truth gently, that sometimes people we love make choices we don't understand, and sometimes those choices hurt. But that doesn't mean we stop being kind. It just means we learn to protect the parts of ourselves we almost gave away too easily. Arc phase is growing fast, faster than I expected, honestly. We just moved into a new office, smaller than Sector Blue's old headquarters, but warmer, no glass walls, no fake smiles. Just engineers, creators, people who believe in building from the ground up, together. We keep a small photo on the wall, not of me, not of Elise, just a picture from the early days, our first prototype, sitting crooked on a folding table, surrounded by pizza boxes and half-drunk coffee cups. It reminds me where I started, who I was, and why I'll never go back to that version of myself who stayed quiet for too long. Sometimes I still get messages, former employees, clients, even strangers. Thank you for standing up. Your story helped me walk away from something toxic. I didn't think it was possible to come back from betrayal like that, and every time I tell them the same thing. You don't have to fight loud, you just have to fight smart. You don't need revenge to win, you just need to outlast the lie and build something the truth can live in. There was a time when I thought the worst thing that could happen to me was losing Elise, losing the company, losing everything we built. But I was wrong. The worst thing would have been staying, pretending, settling for a life built on betrayal, just because I was too tired to start again. Now, I wake up every day knowing I didn't just survive what they did to me, I transformed because of it. And the best part, they thought I'd never come back. But not only did I come back, I came back clean. I came back better. And I left them behind, empty, broke, and forgotten.